They said the ocean was safe, until the morning it chewed us up and spat us out. No one saw the danger coming, least of all Tom, and certainly not our Pitbull, Daisy. What happened next was the last thing anyone expected. The Carter family always arrived early. Even in their 50s, Helen and George couldn't stand the midday crowds or the shrieking kids. Their son, Tom, was the only one still wild enough to surf before breakfast. The beach was a Carter tradition, a place to pretend nothing was broken back home. Daisy, their Pitbull, was already digging a hole near the umbrellas, flinging sand at Helen's new sandals. Helen tried to scold her, but Daisy's big yellow eyes had a way of bulldozing through rules and resentments. Maybe that's why Tom loved her most. Tom, grown man, 2 kids, but still a boy when the waves called. Helen watched as Tom zipped up his wetsuit. There was something she wanted to say, something about last night's argument, but she swallowed it. Pride tastes like metal, hard and bitter. Hey ma, look. Tom grinned, already wading in, board under one arm. Helen waved. George grunted, eyes hidden behind cheap sunglasses. Helen wondered if he was thinking about the mortgage, or about their daughter Sam, who'd skipped the trip again, blaming work but really just avoiding all of them. There's always a moment, right before disaster, when everything feels too calm. The sky was syrup blue, the air soft as a lullaby. Daisy, sensing Helen's anxiety, plopped her massive head on Helen's lap, breathing warm dog breath. For a moment Helen relaxed. A scream shattered the morning. Not a child, not playful, a man's scream. Tom's scream. Helen jerked up, heart hammering so hard it drowned out everything but instinct. She saw Tom flailing, the water boiling white and red around him. A shadow, massive, dark, moving with terrifying purpose. "Shark!" someone shouted. Everything else was noise. George was on his feet, uselessly yelling. Lifeguards scrambled. But it was Daisy who moved first. Like some forgotten weapon, she launched into the surf, powerful legs pounding, ears flat, muscles rippling with raw intent. Helen felt frozen, watching her son and her dog disappear into chaos. The ocean, usually a mother's comfort, now looked like a monstrous mouth. And then, something you'd only see in those viral videos or late-night news. Daisy barreled straight into the foam, teeth bared, barking like hell itself. The shark twisted, momentarily distracted, just long enough for Tom to wrench free, blood inking the water. Helen's scream joined Tom's. George waded in, useless against the waves. Lifeguards followed, but Daisy was the only one near enough. Snapping, snarling, biting at a force of nature that didn't care about family or dogs or summer plans. By the time they hauled Tom out, Daisy was still circling, barking at the empty water. Tom's leg was mangled, but he was alive. Helen crumpled to the sand. Sobbing, Daisy pressed against her like a living shield. The world spun and the crowd gathered, all eyes wide. But even as the adrenaline faded, Helen sensed that something deeper had shifted. Survival has a price. And the Carters' wounds, old hidden, were about to surface, just as bloody and real as Tom's leg. If you think a family comes together after a brush with death, think again. Old wounds bleed the longest, and the Carter house was about to learn how deep the cuts really went. The hospital was a mausoleum of cheerful colors and fake plants. Tom's leg was stitched and wrapped, the doctors praising miraculous luck, and the dog's quick reaction. Helen nodded through it all, her mind a tangle of guilt and gratitude, fear and strangely resentment. She sat by Tom's bed, staring at his ashen face, the bruised flesh peeking from under layers of gauze. George stood awkwardly by the window, arms crossed so tight it looked painful. "Tell me again how it happened?" George asked, as if Tom might change the story, make it easier to digest. Tom tried to joke. "Just a little misunderstanding between me and the local wildlife, Dad." But his laugh was brittle, and Helen saw it, the terror simmering under his sarcasm. She wanted to hold him like when he was small and feverish, but all she could do was smooth the blanket and fuss with his pillow. The nurse came and went, always chipper, always busy. She brought Daisy. Somehow the rules didn't apply today. Daisy leaped onto the bed, nose to Tom's cheek, whimpering. The dog was a hero, they all said. Local news had already left a card. But Helen could see it. Tom's hands shaking as he stroked Daisy's head. The hero dog didn't stop his nightmares. George cleared his throat. You're lucky, son. Real lucky. Helen flinched at the word luck. As if their family ever had any. As if surviving a shark bite erased all the years of silent dinners. Sam's empty chair, Tom's divorce, George's endless side jobs to keep the roof from caving in. Daisy whined, sensing the tension. Outside, the hospital TV in the hallway replayed the story. Brave Pitbull saves local surfer from shark attack. Family bonds forever changed. Helen almost laughed. Changed, yes. Fixed? Don't kid yourself. Sam arrived at dusk, late as always, hair wild from the wind. She hovered in the doorway, eyes scanning for evidence that she was needed, or would be blamed. Helen's voice cracked. He's going to be fine, the doctor says. It's a miracle. Sam hugged Tom awkwardly, avoiding his bandaged leg. Heard Daisy made the 6 o'clock news, she said, mustering a grin. George, already tense, barked. You could have called, you know. Or shown up on time. Sam's mouth tightened. Some of us have jobs, Dad. Not all of us can drop everything for a family photo op. Helen winced, ready for the next explosion. But Tom, always the peacemaker, even with teeth marks in his calf, broke the silence. She's here, Dad. That's what counts. If only that were true. Helen watched her family, her grown children, her husband, her wounded son, her anxious dog, and felt a strange ache. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was the years of unspoken words clawing their way out. The nurse brought dinner. No one ate. The hospital soup congealed. A sad metaphor for every family meal they botched over the years. Tom drifted off to sleep, Daisy curled at his feet. Sam slipped out to make a call. George muttered about paperwork, and Helen was left alone with her thoughts, and the blaring silence. She wondered, not for the first time, if the real danger wasn't lurking in the waves, but sitting right here, wrapped in family ties and old regrets. One thing was certain, the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Sometimes it takes a disaster to rip the masks off. But what happens when what's exposed is uglier than anyone imagined? Tonight, every Carter will face the truth about the bonds they pretend to honor. Helen barely slept. Hospitals at night are louder than any storm. Beeping machines, squeaky carts, the occasional shout that chills your blood. She stared at the ceiling tiles and counted the cracks, trying to will her mind somewhere else, anywhere but here. By morning, Tom was awake, gray and worn. Sam was curled in a chair by the window, face ghostly in the pale light. George gone, probably at the nurse's desk demanding coffee or answers. The hospital social worker appeared, bright-eyed and too perky for this family. Just checking in. How are we doing? Helen's smile was all teeth. Well, one of us got bitten by a shark, and the rest of us are just snapping at each other. The social worker, unfazed, handed over a pamphlet about trauma counseling. Family events like this can resurface old conflicts. It's normal. Normal? Helen wanted to scoff. In the Carter family, drama was the only thing that ever felt normal. Daisy, dozing at Tom's side, lifted her head when George marched in, waving a sheaf of paperwork. They want to know who's paying for what. Insurance only covers so much. And there's a form for the dog, believe it or not. Sam rolled her eyes. Maybe Daisy can get her own GoFundMe. Helen tried to keep her voice even, but years of stress sharpened her words. Maybe if you'd been around more, George, we wouldn't be in this mess. Tom sighed, louder than necessary. Can we not do this now? George bristled. What? Speak the truth for once. Sam cut in, voice cold. You mean your truth, Dad. Not everyone's. Suddenly, every resentment, every slight and silent judgment, was floating in the sterile air. Helen couldn't take it anymore. All I ever wanted was for us to hold together. But we can't go a single day without falling apart. Tom almost died, and all we can do is pick old wounds. For a moment even Daisy went still. The silence was a verdict. George looked down, face red. I'm scared, Helen. I almost lost my son, and I don't know what to do with that. I can't fix it. Helen's anger softened just a crack. Sam's eyes filled with tears she'd never admit to. Tom managed a weak smile. You know what's worse than a shark? Family therapy. That broke the tension a little. They all laughed, thin and ragged but real. But as the laughter faded, Helen saw the truth. Love alone didn't heal everything. And survival, like forgiveness, was something you had to choose over and over. The doctors returned, discussing the long road ahead. Surgeries, bills, therapy. Daisy, officially a canine hero, was cleared to stay, her wagging tail a rare source of comfort. But when the news crew returned, bright lights, intrusive questions, Helen found herself pushed to the edge. Was it courage or instinct? They asked, shoving a microphone at her. Did you know your son was in danger? Helen's voice was low but steady. I always knew the real danger was letting our fears keep us silent. Daisy just reminded us what fighting for family looks like. That night, Helen stood at Tom's bedside, holding his hand while Daisy snored at their feet. She realized something had shifted. Maybe they'd never be perfect. Maybe the Carters were just good at surviving, each in their own flawed, stubborn way. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not on Tom. Not on Daisy. And for the first time in years, not on George or Sam either. You think you know who your family is, until a single question detonates years of buried secrets. Tonight, in a hospital room thick with blame and regret, the truth is finally coming for the Carters. Night in the hospital was a gauntlet. Endless rounds by nurses, Tom's half-awake groans, Daisy's anxious pacing. Helen pretended to nap, but every sound kept her strung tight. Sometime after midnight, she caught George whispering on the phone in the hallway. Too low for words but sharp enough for suspicion. Sam, meanwhile, kept vanishing for work calls that left her even more brittle. By morning, Helen's patience had splintered. She snapped at the nurse, at the doctor, even at Daisy, who yelped and sulked under the bed. Guilt knotted Helen's chest, but exhaustion had made her skinless. Breakfast was untouched on Tom's tray, cold eggs staring up like an accusation. Sam arrived late, eyes ring dark. She stared at her brother, then at George, and finally at Helen. We need to talk, Sam said. George bristled. Not now. Yes, now, Sam shot back. We keep waiting for the right time. There isn't one. Tom propped himself up, voice rough. What's going on? Sam's jaw set. We're circling the real problem, and I'm tired of pretending. Mom, Dad, why do you think I stopped coming home? Why did you two start sleeping in separate rooms? Why do we only talk when someone's bleeding? George's face hardened. Sam. No, let her speak, Helen whispered, clutching Daisy's collar for strength. Sam's voice broke. It wasn't the fights or Tom's divorce or even money. It's the way we handle pain alone. We shut down, close ranks, pretend nothing happened. And when something finally does, like this, suddenly we're a family. Sorry, but I'm done faking. The room was so silent. Helen heard her own heart thudding. Tom blinked, stunned. George looked away, jaw working. Helen swallowed her pride. You're right, Sam. We don't talk. I don't talk. I hold everything in, thinking I'm protecting you, but really I'm just afraid. I was afraid every day your father would leave. Afraid you'd hate me for staying. Afraid Tom would be broken by the world the way I was. Sam's eyes shimmered. I don't hate you, Mom. But I need you to stop lying. To yourself. To us. George spoke softer than ever. I thought being a man meant holding it together. Paying the bills, swallowing the pain. But what did it get us? Tom cut through the tension with dry wit. A front row seat to a shark attack and a pit bull who's more family than half of us. Even Daisy gave a low, knowing bark. Helen smiled through tears. We survived a shark, but I'm not sure we can survive each other. Sam reached across the bed, squeezed Helen's hand. Then let's try. For real this time. No more hiding. A beat. The family, awkward and exposed, started to reach across the gap. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but honestly, maybe for the first time. Helen exhaled. The pain of truth was sharp, but also strangely clean. But just as they seemed to find their footing, an urgent knock shattered the moment. A hospital administrator strode in, file in hand, face grave. Mrs. Carter, may I speak with you in private? There's a matter about your insurance, and something else about the day of the attack. Helen's gut twisted. Some shadows aren't gone, they're just waiting for the lights to go out. What if your hero wasn't supposed to be there at all? In a world built on little lies, one hospital meeting threatens to unravel the story everyone wants to believe. What Helen learns now could destroy her family's fragile truce. Helen followed the administrator down a linoleum corridor, her heart thudding so loudly it drowned out the fluorescent buzz. She tried to remember the last time she'd been alone, truly alone with her own thoughts. Maybe before the kids were born. Maybe never. Inside the office, the administrator closed the door, face pinched with nerves. Mrs. Carter, I need to clarify a few things about the day of your son's accident. Helen nodded. Of course. Anything. The administrator hesitated, shuffling paperwork. The lifeguard's incident report doesn't match the hospital intake form. You told the paramedics Daisy was a trained service animal. Helen's mouth went dry. She remembered the panic, the shouting, the blood, the desperate need for them to let Daisy into the ambulance. She's not certified, but she's family. She saved my son's life. The administrator pressed on. That's not all. There's surveillance footage from the boardwalk. It shows you letting Daisy off leash, in violation of city ordinances. And, she paused softer, the city's insurance provider is already asking questions. If it's ruled negligence, you could be liable for medical costs. Helen felt the room tilt. We did what we had to. Daisy is why Tom's alive. I believe you, Mrs. Carter, the woman said quietly. But the city sees it differently. And there's something else. We received an anonymous complaint. Someone claimed Daisy has a history of aggression. They want her quarantined, possibly put down. For a moment, Helen saw nothing but red. All the love and terror she felt for Daisy twisted into a single, animal howl of protest. No. She's not dangerous. She's our Daisy. The administrator's eyes softened. I know what she did. But the process is out of my hands. Animal control will want a statement from you and your family. And if there's any history. Helen remembered the neighbor's yappy terrier. The fight over the broken fence. The letter from animal control that she'd shredded out of spite. One little lie to the vet, and now it could cost Daisy everything. Outside, Helen heard Sam's voice raised in anger. George's barked reply. The family's fragile truce was already splintering. Helen's world narrowed to a single point. Would Daisy be punished for saving Tom's life? Or would the Carters lose everything, all for a rule they'd never thought would matter, until it did? She walked back down the hall, hands shaking, eyes blurry. At Tom's door she stopped, watching her family argue. Sam red-faced, George defiant, Tom too weary to fight. Daisy pressed flat under the bed, eyes shining with trust and fear. Helen realized. Surviving disaster didn't mean you got a miracle. Sometimes you just got more problems. She stepped inside, voice trembling but loud. There's something you all need to hear. And this time, I'm not hiding anything. Her family fell silent, every face turning toward her. But before she could begin, her phone buzzed. Animal control. The future clawing at the door. The Carters thought the hardest battle was behind them. They were wrong. The fight for Daisy's life would test everything they believed about family and about forgiveness. How far would you go to save the one who saved you? As the system sharpens its knives, the Carters must face their deepest fears and their darkest secrets if they hope to protect Daisy from a fate worse than the shark. Animal control arrived just after sunrise, moving with the clinical efficiency of people who have learned not to care too much. 2 officers, all uniforms and clipped voices, met Helen at the hospital entrance. Daisy's leash felt impossibly heavy in her hand. "We're here for the dog involved in yesterday's incident," said the older officer, his tone bland, eyes flicking past Helen to where Daisy wagged uncertainly at her side. "We need to take her for observation." Helen stood tall, but her insides quaked. "She's not a threat. She saved my son's life. She belongs with us." The younger officer, a woman with a lined face and surprisingly gentle eyes, crouched down and scratched Daisy behind the ears. "We know, ma'am, but we have to follow protocol. 3 days of quarantine, then a behavioral assessment. That's the law." The Carters gathered around, George stiff and bristling, Tom pale and furious even in his wheelchair, Sam silent but burning with a quiet, righteous rage. Tom wheeled forward, voice hoarse. "If Daisy hadn't been there, I'd be dead. She did more than any of you people ever could." The older officer flinched just a little. "It's not personal, son." "Maybe it should be," Sam snapped. "Maybe if any of you knew what family meant." George cut her off, his voice shaking with anger and something deeper, older. "Enough. Yelling won't help Daisy. We have to work the system, not fight it." Helen felt the old fear curling in her gut. She remembered the night Daisy arrived. Just a trembling pup in a cardboard box, abandoned on their porch after the neighbor's kid got bitten by a stray. George had wanted to call animal control even then. Helen had insisted. "She's ours now." That promise echoed now, cruel and sharp. She looked into Daisy's trusting eyes. "I'll get you home. I swear." The officers loaded Daisy into the van, ignoring Tom's tears and Sam's string of legal threats. The van's door slammed. The Carters stood frozen, watching the only real hero of their disaster disappear behind steel and glass. Inside, Tom raged. "If anything happens to her, I'll never forgive myself. Or you," he added, shooting a glare at George, whose own face was twisted with guilt and impotence. Helen tried to soothe Tom, but her words fell flat. Sam was already on her phone, searching for animal lawyers. George paced, muttering about the cost, about making it right. Helen wanted to scream. At the city, at her family, at the world for punishing a dog for doing what no one else had dared. That day the Carters barely spoke. The press camped outside, hungry for the next headline. "Hero dog faces execution?" Helen fielded calls from reporters and lawyers, each one twisting the knife a little deeper. But alone that night, Helen made a decision. She dug through the old drawer in the kitchen, pulling out every slip of paper. Vet records, city warnings, that letter she'd hidden years ago. She made a pot of coffee, steeling herself for war. If she had to turn her life inside out to save Daisy, so be it. As she packed her files and rehearsed her speech for animal control, Helen's heart finally stopped racing. She wasn't just fighting for Daisy. She was fighting for everything she tried and failed to protect. For the first time, the fear was gone. Only purpose remained. You think it's about saving a dog, but what the Carters uncover next will force them to confront who they really are. Tomorrow the real battle begins. What's a family secret worth, your reputation, your home, or the life of the one who saved you? As Helen walks into the hearing, she carries every lie and every hope the Carters have ever known. Not everyone will walk out the same. The morning of Daisy's hearing broke gray and raw, the kind of weather that seeps under your skin. Helen ironed her best blouse with trembling hands, rehearsing what to say and what not to say. The others moved around her in tight, anxious circles. George in his old suit, combing hair he didn't have. Tom stubbornly refusing pain meds, wanting to be sharp, wanting to fight. Sam dressed for battle, phone glued to her palm, voice clipped and precise as she lined up character witnesses. They drove to the city animal shelter in silence. It was a squat, ugly building behind a chain-link fence, already ringed by news vans and curious onlookers. Protesters with homemade signs, "Save Hero Daisy," mingled with those who saw only the word Pitbull. Helen gripped George's hand so hard he winced. Inside, the hearing room was cramped and overheated. A bored city attorney, 2 animal control officers, and a panel of 3 officials with the power to decide Daisy's fate. The Carters sat together, fragile but united. For now, the city attorney began. He recited ordinances and fines, the dangerous breed clause, Daisy's previous complaint. The facts fell like hammers. Daisy off-leash, neighbor's terrier, the old animal control warning. Helen could feel the panel's sympathy shrinking with every word. Then it was Helen's turn. Her hands shook but her voice was steady. "We broke the rules. We know. But Daisy isn't dangerous. She's family. She did what no one else could. She saved my son from a shark. Every scar on Tom's leg is proof." The room was silent, all eyes fixed on her. Sam jumped in, her voice slicing through the doubt. "This is what pit bulls are for, they protect. Daisy has never attacked a person. She's never bitten anyone. She's our hero." Tom's turn came. He rolled up his pant leg, exposing the mangled, healing flesh. "If she's dangerous, then I'd rather be in danger. Because without Daisy, I wouldn't be here at all." Even George spoke up, breaking through his usual gruffness. "You want to punish someone? Punish me. I let her off the leash. I signed the papers I didn't read. But you don't punish a hero for being brave." The officials asked questions, poked holes, reminded them about laws. But it was the city attorney who lobbed the real grenade. "Mrs. Carter, can you explain why you hid the prior warning from animal control? Or why your neighbor filed a sworn affidavit stating Daisy bit her dog? That's perjury." Helen's breath caught. The secret she tried to bury was out, dragged under fluorescent lights. Sam squeezed Helen's shoulder. "Tell the truth, Mom." Helen closed her eyes, then opened them, voice barely above a whisper. "I was scared. I thought if anyone found out, Daisy would be taken. I thought I was protecting my family. I'm sorry. It was raw, ugly, real." The board conferred. 5 minutes that felt like a lifetime. Finally, the chairwoman looked up. "We'll deliberate further. For now, Daisy will remain in quarantine. We'll contact you with a decision." Outside, the crowd pressed close, hoping for a happy ending. Helen wasn't sure she believed in those anymore. The Carters drove home, silent, wounded but together. Sam leaned her head on Tom's shoulder. George squeezed Helen's hand and didn't let go. But that night a letter arrived, a legal notice. The neighbor had filed a civil suit, demanding damages for trauma and endangerment. The Carters' fight had only just begun. Just when you think the worst is over, the past comes knocking again. The Carters must decide, will they finally stand together? Or will old betrayals tear them apart for good? When justice turns into a witch hunt, who stands with you? The Carters are cornered by neighbors, the law, and their own past mistakes. But tonight, a final act of loyalty will change everything they thought they knew about forgiveness. The lawsuit hit the family like a second wave. Helen read the complaint over black coffee at 3 a.m., the legal jargon blurring into a smear of fear and fury. Trauma, endangerment, emotional distress, it was all there, weighted with dollar signs. The neighbor, Mrs. Harkness, wanted Daisy put down and the Carters' insurance to pay for therapy sessions, fencing, even a new puppy. George fumed, pacing the kitchen until sunrise. "They're going to bleed us dry. Over a dog fight that lasted 3 seconds. Tom just stared at his bandaged leg, the scars beginning to itch. "If Daisy's put down, I'm done. I'm serious, Mom." Sam, in full battle mode, called every lawyer in town, making lists and snapping orders. We fight. We fight harder than ever. But Helen's courage, after days of adrenaline and sorrow, felt like tissue paper. Guilt gnawed her. Had she brought this on them all, trying to hide the past? Was Daisy truly innocent, or just lucky until now? The family lawyer, a tired man in a cheap suit, sat with them that afternoon. "It's ugly," he admitted. "You can win in court, but you'll lose in the court of public opinion. The city doesn't like bad press. Neither do juries." "Can Daisy testify?" Tom joked, earning a watery laugh. The lawyer looked at Helen. "Do you want a settlement? Apologize, pay, and Daisy gets a warning but no dangerous animal label. But if you push for a trial, it's risky." The room simmered with anger and helplessness. Sam refused. "No deals. Daisy did nothing wrong. And neither did we." Helen, exhausted, finally snapped. "What if it's not about right or wrong? What if it's just about losing less?" For once, George spoke gently. "You're not alone, Helen. We're in this together, whatever you decide." The next day, a city official brought news. The panel would allow Daisy a supervised behavioral exam, the final test. If she passed, she'd go home. If not, the official didn't finish the sentence. Helen spent the night with Daisy at the shelter, her hand curled in soft fur, whispering all the apologies and promises she'd never made before. "You saved us. Now I have to save you." The test was tense, a parade of strange people and loud noises. Daisy, trembling at first, rallied, nuzzling, obeying, licking the hands of city staff. When a toddler tripped and shrieked, Daisy only whined and pressed herself to the ground. Helen's tears would not stop. She clung to every moment, praying to whatever would listen. The panel watched, took notes, and left. Helen sat on the bench outside, waiting for the verdict with her heart beating out of time. Tom arrived in his wheelchair, Sam and George on either side. "Whatever happens," Tom said, "Daisy's family." The shelter door opened. The official's face was unreadable. "You can take her home. On probation. With conditions." Helen nearly collapsed with relief. They all crowded around Daisy, laughing, crying, promising to never take her for granted again. But as they left, Mrs. Harkness stood in her yard, arms folded, eyes like ice. "You got lucky," she spat. "Next time you won't." Helen met her gaze. "We don't need luck. We have each other." But as they drove away, Helen knew the wounds would take longer to heal than any bite. Family scars run deep, but sometimes they remind you where your strength really lives. You think you've heard it all, but one last confession will test the Carters' new bond. What Helen reveals at home will make you question everything about loyalty and love. What happens after the storm, when survival isn't enough? The Carters are finally together, but one last truth will shake their foundation and offer a second chance at forgiveness they never thought possible. The house felt unfamiliar, as if re-entering after a war. Sunlight streamed across the living room floor, highlighting paw prints and crumbs, the detritus of ordinary chaos. Daisy bounded from room to room, free at last, her tail painting arcs of joy. Tom trailed after her, his limp pronounced but his face brighter than it had been in weeks. Helen sat at the kitchen table, the court documents stacked beside her, a mug cooling untouched in her hands. Across from her, George scrolled through his phone in silence. Sam leaned against the counter, half listening, eyes darting between her mother and her brother as if waiting for an aftershock. For a while there was peace, quiet, real, almost fragile. The Carters made tea, Daisy sprawled beneath the table, and Tom read aloud letters of support from strangers who'd seen their story on TV. For a moment, Helen let herself believe this could be enough. But as dusk settled, a heaviness returned. Helen gathered her family in the living room. "There's something I need to say," she began, voice soft but unwavering. "I've carried a secret for years, a small thing, but it grew with every lie, every time I thought I was protecting us. George looked up, wary. Sam's expression darkened, but Tom just nodded, as if he'd known all along that this story wasn't finished. Helen took a breath. Daisy wasn't just an accident on our porch. The day I found her, I knew whose dog she really was. She belonged to the neighbor, the one who called animal control. She ran away because she was afraid, not because she was dangerous. I saw the way she flinched at loud voices, how she always hid when someone got angry. Tom stared, speechless. George's jaw worked, but nothing came out. I lied, Helen went on. When the neighbor came asking, I said I hadn't seen her. I thought I was saving a dog, but maybe I was just running from my own mistakes. And I let you all believe Daisy was ours, when really she was just lost and looking for someone to trust. A deep, aching silence filled the room. Sam was the first to speak. Why now, Mom? Helen's hands trembled. Because I'm tired of hiding. Because I saw what nearly losing Daisy did to us, to me. Family isn't about blood or paperwork or the stories we tell to make ourselves look good. It's about what we're willing to risk for each other. And for the truth. Tom wiped his eyes, breaking into a smile. She chose us, Mom. That's all that matters. George finally found his voice. You should have told us. But thank you. For keeping us together, even if it was messy. Daisy leapt into Helen's lap, as if she understood every word. They laughed, they cried, and for the first time in years nothing was left unsaid. The wounds, old and new, began to knit, not because the Carters were perfect, but because they finally let themselves be real. Later, as Helen watched her family drift into easy conversation, she realized the hardest storms sometimes bring the clearest skies. Survival, she thought, is only the beginning. The rest is choosing each other over and over again. In the end, a shark wasn't the thing that threatened the Carters. It was fear and secrets and pride. And the one who saved them all had 4 legs and a heart bigger than the ocean.
Cold steel under fur, harsh straps bite into skin, 2 sets of eyes, one trembling in fear, one fixed on the other. A syringe gleams under the light. Then a shout breaks the room apart. Doors crash open. Someone has come, and the clock on their fate starts now. Cold steel presses against her belly, leaching the last bit of warmth from her body. The straps bite into her legs, holding her flat against the table. Each shallow breath rattles in her chest. From the corner, a sharp whimper. The pup. He's locked in a wire cage, paws scraping metal, eyes fixed on her. His small body shivers, but his gaze never leaves hers. She pulls against the neck strap, trying to get closer, but the coarse fibers only dig deeper into her skin. The room smells of disinfectant and wet fur. Voices move around them, detached, clinical. No microchip. No adopter. They go today. On the tray beside her, a syringe catches the light, a bead of liquid trembling at the tip. The pup barks, a short, desperate sound that bounces off the sterile walls. One of the staff bangs a clipboard against the cage to quiet him. She jerks against the straps, growling low, but a hand presses her shoulder down. "Hold her still," the handler says, sliding the needle from its sleeve. The pup hurls himself against the cage wall, rattling it so hard the latch buzzes. No one turns toward him. The needle hovers above her leg. That's when the shout cuts through the air. "Stop, don't touch them!" The door bangs open and a man storms in, tall, rain dripping from his jacket, boots loud on the tile. His eyes sweep the room, the cadella pinned to the table, the pup caged, the syringe poised. The handler stiffens. "Sir, you can't be here." "I'm here for them both," he says, stepping closer. "And you're not putting that needle in either one." A woman at the counter moves quickly between him and the table. "This is county policy. They're unclaimed." "The hold expired this morning." "Not anymore." He pulls a folded paper from his jacket, slapping it onto the tray beside the syringe. "Medical hold, 30 days. Both animals." The handler glances at the letter. "That's not valid without—" "It's signed by the county vet," the man cuts in. "And she's on her way here if you want to argue in person." The woman's jaw tightens. "They're aggressive." "They're terrified," he says, stepping past her. "Now unstrap her and open the cage." The handler hesitates. The man's voice hardens. Now! The first strap comes loose. She kicks free, dropping to the floor and running straight to the pup's cage. She presses her nose to the bars, whining. The man yanks the latch open. The pup bursts out, stumbling into her side. She circles him once, checking every inch before pressing close, shoulder to shoulder. "They leave with me," the man says, looking straight at the handler. "And if anyone tries to stop us, I'll make sure the county hears about it." The woman at the counter folds her arms but doesn't move. He opens the door to the hallway. "Let's go." Their nails click against the tile as they follow him. A staffer steps into the hall, blocking the way. "You don't have clearance," the man keeps walking. "Try me." They pass, the pup keeping tight to her side, both of them glancing back until the outside light hits their faces. Rain falls steady now, bouncing off the hood of a dark pickup. He opens the rear door and she jumps in without hesitation. The pup scrambles up after her, curling into her side. The man closes the door, glances back toward the shelter, and gets behind the wheel. The engine rumbles to life. The building shrinks in the rearview mirror. In the back seat, the two of them are pressed together, safe for now, but the fight has only begun. The rain drums harder on the truck's roof as they hit the first stoplight out of town. In the rearview mirror, Miller sees them both huddled together, the pup pressed into Luna's side, Luna's head slightly bent toward him as if to shield him from the outside world. Miller keeps one hand steady on the wheel, the other on the folded paper in his jacket pocket. It's his only shield. 30 days of breathing room, nothing more. After that, the county will decide if they live together, apart or not at all. By the time they reach his place, a small house set back from the road, yard enclosed by chain-link fence, the rain has turned to a mist. He opens the rear door and Luna jumps out, pausing to make sure the pup follows. The pup's paws land in the wet gravel with a soft slap. "Come on," Miller says, holding the gate. They walk in as if they've done it before, she ahead, the pup tucked close. Inside, the warmth of the wood stove greets them. Miller grabs 2 towels from the laundry room, drying Luna first. She stands still under his hands, watching him closely. The pup, restless, tries to dart past, but Luna blocks him with her body until Miller takes the second towel to him. "Hungry?" Miller asks, though the answer's obvious. In the kitchen, he fills 2 bowls, one with kibble, one with softened puppy food. The sound of metal on tile is followed by the quick rhythm of eating. Luna eats slowly, lifting her head now and then to check on the pup, who devours his portion like it might vanish. When they're done, Miller tosses the towels in the hamper and sits at the table with his phone. There are already 3 missed calls from County Shelter Office. He lets them go to voicemail and scrolls to a different contact, Karen Steele, County Attorney. "They'll push back," Karen says after he explains. "They're claiming you took 2 animals on a single hold. They might try to split them. They've been together since before I got there," Miller says. "Splitting them isn't an option." "Not to you," Karen replies. "But the county doesn't weigh emotional bonds. You need proof they're a bonded pair. Records, witness statements, anything." Miller glances toward the living room. Luna is curled on the rug by the stove, the pup half lying on her front legs. She rests her chin across his back. "I'll get the proof," he says. That night he sets a blanket in the corner of his bedroom. Luna lies down without prompting, the pup tucked against her. She doesn't close her eyes until his breathing slows. The next morning, a county truck is parked at the end of his driveway. Diane, the shelter manager, steps out, clipboard in hand. "You've got 2 animals on 1 form," she says without greeting. "They came as a set," Miller replies. "That's not how the policy works." "That's how it works this time." She exhales through her nose, jotting something on the clipboard. "Expect an inspection and don't leave the county with them." When she's gone, Miller calls Ruth, a retired animal control officer who still knows the county system inside out. "2 together, huh?" she says. "If they were seized or dropped off at the same time, there should be an intake note linking them. That'd be your leverage." By noon, Ruth is at his table, sorting through a stack of printouts. "Here, same intake date, same pickup location, same report number. That's your bond proof." Miller scans the paper. "Enough to hold them together?" It's a start. That afternoon, he drives both dogs to Dr. Harris for a checkup. Harris listens to their lungs, checks their teeth and examines their paws. "They're in better shape than I expected," Harris says. "She's underweight, but strong. He's small for his age, but alert. And yeah, he's glued to her." "Would you put that in writing?" Harris smiles. "Absolutely." That evening, Miller sits at the table with a growing pile of documents, intake forms, medical notes, Ruth's witness statement. Outside, the rain has stopped, but the air feels heavy, as if holding more to come. The phone rings again. This time it's Sloan, the man in the camo jacket. "You've got something that's mine," Sloan says. "You've got the wrong idea," Miller replies. "They were on my property. That makes them mine." "They were on your property starving," Miller says. "That makes them rescues." Sloan's tone drops lower. "You can't keep them both. The county won't let you." "We'll see." The line goes dead. That night, Luna sleeps closer to the bed. The pup is half on her, half on the blanket. Miller lies awake knowing the real fight isn't about to start. It already has. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to leave your like. 2 days later, the official notice arrives. Miller finds the envelope wedged in the screen door when he gets back from the morning walk with Luna and the pup. The county seal is printed in blue on the corner. He doesn't have to open it to know what's inside. The letter is short. Animal ID 6723 and Animal ID 6724 are subject to review for separate placement after medical hold expiration. You may submit objections within 10 days. Separate placement. Miller folds the paper slowly, pressing the crease hard before setting it on the table. Luna is lying on the rug, the pup pressed against her side. She lifts her head at the sound of the paper and watches him with those deep, steady eyes. "They want to split you up," he says quietly. In the afternoon, Ruth drops by again. She listens without interrupting, her arms crossed. They're playing it by the book. 2 IDs, 2 files. You need more than proof they were picked up together. You need proof they can't function apart. How do you prove something like that? Videos. Observations, vet's notes, anything that shows separation stress. If you can get them documented reacting badly when apart, that's evidence. The next day, Miller sets up a camera in the living room. He waits until Luna and the pup are resting together, then carries the pup into the kitchen and closes the door. The reaction is immediate. Luna's up on her feet, pacing, whining. The pup is yelping on the other side, scratching at the door. Within 2 minutes, both are panting hard. Miller lets them reunite. The pup presses into her chest and she licks his ears in quick, anxious motions. The video captures it all. He sends the footage to Karen Steele. She replies in under 5 minutes. "Exactly what we need. Now get Harris to put it in his medical notes." That afternoon, they drive to Harris's clinic. Harris watches the video twice, nodding. Separation anxiety's real, especially in bonded rescues. I'll add it to the file. Back at the house, Miller finds another envelope, this one hand-delivered. No return address. Inside is a single sheet of paper with block letters, 1 or none. He doesn't show it to Ruth or Karen, but that night he moves the truck inside the garage and checks the fence locks twice. The county's push intensifies over the next week. Diane calls twice, each time with a new procedural requirement. An in-home inspection, updated vaccination records, proof of secure containment. Miller complies with all of it, keeping the paperwork tight. During the inspection, the county rep walks through every room, taking notes. Luna stays between the rep and the pup the entire time, moving subtly to keep herself as a barrier. "Protective," the rep comments. "Bonded," Miller corrects. 2 days later, Karen calls. Sloan's filed a claim again, this time for both dogs. He's saying they were abandoned on his land and that you took them illegally. "They were on his land because he left them there," Miller says. "We'll need to prove that," Karen replies. "Do you have any record of the property conditions when they were picked up?" Ruth might. Ruth does. She shows up with a worn file folder containing intake reports from the seizure. The notes are blunt. Adult female and male pup found without food or clean water. Shelter constructed from sheet metal, both animals underweight. The photos are worse. Luna standing in mud, chain looped around her neck, the pup half hidden behind her legs. Karen takes the copies. "These will help. But he's not going to stop just because we have proof. He'll push for a hearing. That night, Miller sits on the porch with both dogs at his feet. The air smells of rain coming, and the wind has that low hum it gets before a storm. "You're not going anywhere," he says, scratching behind Luna's ears. The pup yawns, curling tighter into her. Inside, he updates the evidence pile. Intake photos and reports. Vet's notes on health and bond. Video of separation stress. Witness statements from Ruth and Harris. He knows it's strong, but strength doesn't guarantee a win. 3 nights later, a truck idles at the end of his drive. No lights on, just the low growl of the engine in the dark. Luna stands at the window, her body stiff, ears forward. The pup presses close to her side. Miller watches until the truck finally rolls away. The next morning he calls Karen. "We need to move faster." "They set the hearing for the 29th, she says. "That's as fast as it gets." 29 days, 1 day before the hold expires. In the meantime, Sloan keeps circling, driving past Slow, showing up at the feed store when Miller's there, once even walking the property line across from the fence. But every day, Miller sees changes in the dogs. Luna's coat shines more. The pup's ribs are fading under healthy weight. They start to play in the yard, short bursts of running, clumsy rolls in the grass. And every night they sleep curled together. Miller knows the county will see that bond in the hearing. The question is whether they'll care enough to protect it. The rain had stopped in the early morning, leaving the gravel road slick and the air damp. Miller was halfway through feeding the dogs when his phone buzzed. It was Ruth. "Got something," she said without preamble. "You better come see it." 20 minutes later, Miller was in Ruth's kitchen, a mug of black coffee in his hand, while she spread out a series of photocopied documents across the table. "This," she said, tapping a page, "is Sloan's property file from 3 years ago. Different address, different county, same violations. Inadequate shelter, untreated injuries on multiple animals, expired rabies tags." Miller scanned the page. He wasn't charged, fined, and the animals were seized. "But here's the kicker," she flipped to another page. "2 of the dogs seized were a female and a pup, same description as your 2. This was before they were moved to our county." Miller stared at the intake notes. Adult female, brown coat, white chest patch. Male pup, 6 months, lighter coat, blue eyes. The details matched too closely to ignore. "This proves they've been together since at least then," Ruth said. "If we connect these records to the current intake, you've got a continuous history as a bonded pair." Miller could almost feel the ground shift beneath the case. "You think the county will care? They can't ignore it. And Sloan will have to explain why animals taken from him before are back in his possession now." By the time Miller got home, Karen was already calling. "Ruth sent me the files. This is big. We can frame it as a repeat neglect situation and a bonded pair argument all in one." "That enough to shut down a split?" "It should be, but he's not going to roll over. Expect him to attack your credibility instead." That evening, Miller sat in the living room with the dogs. Luna rested her head on the pup's back while he chewed a frayed rope toy. They looked like they'd been carved into the same space in the world, 2 shapes meant to fit together. "You've been fighting for each other a long time," Miller said. "We're not breaking that now." 2 days later, Miller got the first taste of Sloan's counterattack. A letter arrived from Sloan's attorney claiming Miller had created dependency between the dogs, making separation seem more traumatic than it really was. Karen's reaction was sharp. "They're going to try to spin the bond as something unhealthy, which means we double down with expert testimony on why keeping them together is critical." Harris was quick to agree. "Bonded pairs aren't just an emotional thing. It's behavioral stability. Split them now, you risk regression in both." Meanwhile, Sloan made himself more visible. Miller spotted him at the gas station, leaning against his truck, just watching. Later that week, he drove by slow enough that Luna barked from the porch, her first real bark since coming home. The pup barked too, higher pitched but no less serious. On the 23rd day, Miller met Karen at the county office to submit the new evidence. As they walked in, Sloan was already in the lobby, talking to Diane from the shelter. His voice was low, but his eyes followed Miller across the room. "You've been busy," Sloan said. Doing what you should have done, Miller replied, walking past him. Inside the records room, Karen laid out the strategy. We start with the neglect history, then tie the dogs together through continuous records. After that, we hit the behavioral side. Vet notes, video witness statements. We make it so the hearing officer has to acknowledge the bond as a fact, not an opinion. The clerk stamped each document, sliding the growing stack into the case file. This one's going to be messy, she muttered. That night, Miller noticed something new. When the pup fell asleep, Luna didn't just rest near him. She curled around him entirely, her head draped over his side. As if she knew the days left were ticking down and wanted to make sure nothing happened in the dark. On the 24th day, Karen called again. Hearings moved up. 27th, 2 days earlier than we planned. Why? They didn't say, but my guess is Sloan pushed for it. Miller looked at the dogs lying together on the porch. Then we make the next 3 days count. Over those 3 days, Miller recorded everything. Morning walks where they stayed side by side, play sessions where they traded the same toy back and forth, naps where one woke if the other shifted. Every clip was time-stamped, showing the consistency of their bond. The night before the hearing, Ruth stopped by with dinner in a paper bag. She sat at the table, watching Luna and the pup share the same water bowl. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said, you've already done right by them. Tomorrow's the part that matters, Miller replied. The wind rattled the windows that night, but inside the house was still. Luna and the pup slept close, breathing in the same rhythm. Miller sat awake a little longer, the case file on the table beside him. The first fight was getting them out of that room at the shelter. The second was keeping them together through the county's rules. Tomorrow was the third fight, and maybe the last. The 25th day dawned cold and clear, the kind of winter morning where the frost stays on the grass until noon. Miller was stacking wood by the shed when Ruth's truck pulled into the drive. She stepped out holding a brown envelope. You'll want to see this, she said, handing it over. Inside were 3 pages, county inspection notes from a neighboring jurisdiction. Sloan's name was printed at the top of each. The violations were recent: inadequate shelter, food storage contaminated with rodent droppings, and multiple unvaccinated animals. The last page was signed off just 2 months ago. This is from a rescue contact I still know over there, Ruth said. She's not supposed to share, but she doesn't want to see these 2 go back to him. Miller read the lines twice. It's current enough to show he hasn't changed a thing. Exactly. If this gets in front of the hearing officer, it's going to hit hard. That afternoon he met Karen at her office. She skimmed the new documents, her mouth tightening. This makes him look not just unfit before, but unfit right now. I'll move to have it added to the file under recent conduct. Miller leaned back in the chair. You think it's enough to break him? Not on its own, Karen said. But combined with the bonded pair evidence, it corners him. His only move will be to try to discredit you. They both knew that was coming. By evening, Sloan made his play. A post appeared on a local community page, anonymous but obvious in its intent, claiming Miller had taken the dogs without legal right, that he was using them for attention, and that they were better off where they came from. The comments section lit up, some defending Miller, others echoing the accusations. Ruth called almost immediately. Ignore it. He's trying to bait you. Miller didn't respond online, but the post made something clear. Sloan was willing to stir up public opinion if it could sway the county. The next day, Miller got an unexpected ally. Diane from the shelter called, her voice low. I can't officially take sides, she said, but I'll tell you this. Sloan's claim doesn't line up with our intake logs. Those 2 were picked up in bad shape, no sign they were being looked after. I'll testify to that if it comes up. Miller wasn't sure if she'd follow through, but it was the first crack in Sloan's support. Later that afternoon, Harris stopped by for a final health check before the hearing. Luna trotted over to greet him, the pup right behind. They've put on weight and muscle, Harris said, feeling along Luna's ribs. No signs of stress beyond normal alertness. If they were split, I'd expect anxiety spikes in both within a day. Would you say that under oath? Miller asked. Harris smiled faintly. I plan to. That night, Miller sat at the table going over the case file. Luna and the pup were on the rug, the pup gnawing at a toy, while Luna kept a lazy eye on him. Every so often she'd lean over and nudge him with her nose, as if to remind him she was there. It struck Miller that their bond wasn't loud. It wasn't about dramatic displays. It was in the quiet checks, the way they moved as if tethered by an invisible line. On the 26th day, Miller got a call from Karen. "I spoke to the hearing officer's clerk. Sloan tried to have the recent inspection records thrown out, claiming they were irrelevant. They're staying in." "Good," Miller said. "But there's more. Sloan's last-minute witness is a man named Jerry Coulson. Used to work for Animal Control." Miller frowned. "That name's familiar." "It should be. He was on the seizure team when those two were taken off Sloan's property last year. I think Sloan's hoping he'll twist the story." Ruth had a different take when Miller told her. "Jerry's mouth can get him in trouble. If he slips and admits what really happened that day, it's over for Sloan." The morning before the hearing, Miller loaded Luna and the pup into the truck for a long walk along the river. The air was sharp, their breath visible in short clouds. The pup darted ahead, but only within a certain distance, always looking back to Luna, who moved at her own steady pace. Halfway down the trail, Miller stopped and crouched to their level. "Tomorrow we put this to bed," he said, scratching behind Luna's ears. She leaned into his hand, the pup pressing in beside her. When they got home, there was another envelope in the mailbox, this one from the county attorney's office. Inside was the official witness list for the hearing. Alongside Harris and Ruth, Diane's name was printed. She'd signed on after all. That night, as Miller closed the case file for the last time before the hearing, he felt something shift. Sloan had started this fight on offense, confident and aggressive. Now, every new piece of paper was a nail in the coffin of his claim. The dogs were asleep on the rug, curled in a shape so tight it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Miller sat back, the quiet of the house settling around him. Tomorrow, Sloan would walk into that hearing still trying to act like the man in control. But the truth was, control had been slipping from his hands for days, and by tomorrow night, it might be gone completely. The morning of the hearing breaks cold and pale. Frost webs the truck's windshield, and Miller's breath hangs in the air as he loads Luna and the pup into the back seat. Luna hops in first, settling into her usual corner, and the pup follows immediately, pressing into her side like he always does. It's a 30-minute drive to the county building. Miller doesn't turn on the radio. The hum of the engine and the occasional click of the pup's nails on the seat are the only sounds. When they arrive, Karen is waiting by the entrance, coat buttoned tight, a thick folder in her arms. "We're first on the docket," she says. "That's good. No one's tired yet and we have the room's full attention." Inside, the hearing room smells faintly of paper and stale coffee. The metal chairs scrape against the tile as people settle in. Sloan is already at the table on the right, his attorney beside him. He's wearing a pressed shirt, but the camo jacket hangs on the back of his chair like a flag. On the left, Miller takes his seat with Karen. Luna and the pup are allowed inside for this hearing, resting on a blanket at Miller's feet. Almost immediately, the pup shifts until he's leaning against Luna, his head tucked under her chin. The hearing officer, Daniels, enters with a folder in hand. "This is a contested custody matter regarding animal IDs 6723 and 6724, he begins. "Let's hear from the county first." Diane stands, clearing her throat. "The animals were brought in together, same location, same day. Intake notes list both as underweight and in need of immediate care. They were housed together in holding due to their age and condition. That's the first ripple, an official county statement confirming they were bonded from the start." Miller catches the flicker in Sloan's jaw. Karen rises next. "We'll be presenting evidence that these animals are a bonded pair with a shared history, extending back at least 3 years, including previous seizure from Mr. Sloan's property due to neglect." She hands Daniels a set of intake reports and the recent inspection notes. Daniels flips through them slowly, eyebrows tightening. Harris is called first. He sits straight-backed, voice even. They've both shown measurable improvement in weight, coat condition and behavior since being placed with Mr. Miller. In my professional opinion, separating them would cause undue stress and could reverse that progress. Sloan's attorney tries to push. "Isn't it possible they'd adjust to new homes separately?" Harris shakes his head. "Anything's possible, that doesn't make it right." Then Ruth takes the stand. She speaks clearly, laying out the conditions she found when the dogs were seized: the chain around Luna's neck, the sheet metal shelter, the pup half hidden behind her. "She kept him between herself and us the entire time," Ruth says. "That's not random, that's protection." Even Daniels leans forward at that. Next comes the video. Karen plays the footage of the separation test in Miller's kitchen, Luna pacing, whining, the pup scratching frantically at the door. When they're reunited, Luna licks him from head to toe and he presses into her chest. Daniels watches the entire clip without speaking, then says, "Noted." Miller starts to feel the air shift. The room isn't leaning toward Sloan anymore, it's leaning toward the truth. But Sloan isn't done. His attorney calls Jerry Colson, the former animal control officer. Jerry walks in wearing a leather jacket, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Colson," the attorney begins, "when you seized these animals last year, was there any indication they belonged to Mr. Sloan?" Jerry hesitates. "He claimed them, yeah, said they were his." "And did you see any evidence of neglect?" Another pause. "We saw conditions that needed improvement." Karen rises. "Mr. Colson, isn't it true you documented in your report that both animals were underweight with inadequate shelter and no clean water source?" Jerry shifts in his chair. "Yeah, that's in the report. And isn't it also true that you wrote, quote, 'Both animals appear dependent on each other for security and comfort'?" Jerry looks at Sloan, then back at Karen. "That's what I wrote." Miller sees Sloan's attorney's shoulders tighten. That one line undoes half their argument. By the time testimony ends, Daniels has a thick stack of evidence in front of him: the neglect history, the bond proof, the video, and the witness statements. He thanks everyone and says he'll review before issuing a decision. As they leave, Diane catches Miller by the door. "For what it's worth," she says, "I don't think you're going to lose them." Outside, the sky is pale and the air smells like snow coming. Luna and the pup jump into the truck without hesitation, curling together on the blanket. Miller sits for a moment before starting the engine, feeling, for the first time in weeks, that the tide is fully on their side. The hearing isn't over, but the room today told him something. Even people who walked in neutral couldn't ignore the way Luna and the pup fit together. And tomorrow, Daniel's decision will make that bond official, or break it. The morning after the hearing, Miller doesn't leave the house. The frost on the grass melts into a wet shimmer under the pale sun, but he hardly notices. Inside, the phone sits on the kitchen table, silent and heavy. Luna and the pup move between the living room and the porch, restless. They sense the weight in the air, though they can't know what's hanging in the balance. Every time the pup wanders too far, Luna follows, nudging him back toward the house. By mid-afternoon, the call comes. Karen's voice is measured, but Miller hears the current beneath it. "Decision's ready. Daniels wants us there in person." The county building smells the same as yesterday: paper, coffee, and the faint tang of floor cleaner. Daniels sits at the front, reading from a single-page document. Sloan is already there, his attorney leaning close to whisper something that makes Sloan smirk. "This matter concerns animal IDs 6723 and 6724, Daniels begins. "The court has reviewed intake records, witness testimony, expert statements, and behavioral evidence. The question before us is whether these animals should be separated or placed together, and if not separated, in whose custody they should remain." He pauses to look at both sides. Miller keeps his eyes on him. Sloan shifts in his seat. The evidence shows a consistent long-term bond between the animals, extending back at least 3 years, and a documented history of neglect under the claimant, Mr. Sloan. Separating them would cause undue stress and harm. Therefore, Daniels glances down at the paper. Custody of both animals will remain with Mr. Miller. The claim is denied. It's a clean, decisive statement. No conditions, no 30-day windows, final. Miller hears a quiet rush of air leave his own chest. The pup, curled at Luna's feet under the table, lifts his head at the change in tension. Sloan's chair scrapes against the floor as he stands. "You've made a mistake," he says, voice low but sharp. Daniels doesn't look up from his papers. "Decision stands. This hearing is concluded." Sloane takes a step toward Miller's side of the table, but his attorney catches his arm. "Not here," the attorney mutters, steering him toward the door. Karen touches Miller's shoulder. "It's done. They're yours now." Outside, the winter light feels different, brighter even though the sky is still pale. Miller opens the truck door and Luna hops in. The pup follows immediately, climbing halfway onto her back, as if the space is too small for his relief. Halfway home, Miller pulls over on a quiet stretch of road. He turns in his seat to face them. "You're safe now, both of you." Luna blinks slowly, leaning just enough for her shoulder to press into the pup. The pup yawns, then tucks his head under her chin. When they reach the house, Miller leaves the gate open as they step out. The yard is theirs now, not just borrowed time. Luna walks a slow lap of the fence, the pup bouncing behind her. That evening, Ruth stops by with a bag of treats. "Figured it was worth celebrating," she says. She kneels in the living room, letting the pup climb into her lap while Luna stands close. "You fought for them," she tells Miller. "Most people wouldn't have gone this far." Miller shrugs. "Most people haven't seen what they've been through." After Ruth leaves, the house is quiet except for the soft ticking of the stove. Miller sits on the couch. Luna jumps up beside him, the pup following a heartbeat later. They settle in, one on each side, the pup curled against his leg, Luna's head on his shoulder. The fight is over, but the work isn't. There will still be vet visits, training, and the slow unwinding of the fear they carried in with them. But for the first time since that day at the shelter, there's no countdown, no threat at the edge of every thought. Before bed, Miller steps outside. The air is sharp, the stars faint but steady. Behind him, through the open door, Luna and the pup are waiting, their shapes side by side in the warm light of the living room. He steps back inside, closes the door and feels the click of the lock like the last line of a chapter finally finished. The first week after the hearing feels like the thaw after a long winter, not in weather, but in the way the house seems to breathe easier. The paperwork sits in a drawer now, the words "custody granted to Mr. Miller" printed in black and white, no expiration date at the top. Mornings start the same way every day. The rattle of the leash, the sound of nails on the floor, and the soft huff of Luna's breath as she waits by the door. The pup dances in small circles beside her, always careful to stay within her shadow. The air is colder now, the frost clinging longer to the grass. Their walks are unhurried, Luna keeping a steady pace, the pup darting ahead only to double back to her side. On the days when the wind bites harder, Miller cuts the route short and they end up in the yard, where Luna stands like a quiet sentry while the pup digs at the frosted ground. Inside, the wood stove is the heart of the house. Luna claims the rug closest to it, the pup curling into her curve as if the space between them doesn't exist. Sometimes, when the pup sleeps especially deeply, Luna rests her head over his back and closes her eyes, a small sigh leaving her chest. Miller notices the changes in them, Luna's coat thicker and glossier, the pup's body filling out with muscle. Their eyes are brighter. The cautious glances they once gave at sudden noises have softened. Now, when something unexpected happens, they look to him first. One afternoon, Ruth visits with a bag of dog biscuits. She sits on the couch while Luna rests her chin on Ruth's knee, the pup wedging himself between them. "They don't look like the same dogs," Ruth says. "They're not," Miller replies. "Not anymore." Later that week, Harris stops by for a final follow-up. He watches as Luna and the pup share the same water bowl, then lie down together without a sound. "Bond like that," Harris says. "You don't see it often. You kept the right pair together." There's a quiet evening when the first snow falls. Miller leaves the porch light on and watches from the doorway as the two of them step out into the white. The pup bounces, leaving chaotic little prints while Luna moves slowly, her breath clouding in the cold. Every so often she lowers her head to sniff the snow before glancing back at him. When they come inside, Miller towels them off. Luna stands still under the rough fabric, the pup wriggling but never straying far. They settle on the rug, steam rising faintly from their fur in the stove's heat. The rhythm of life settles in, walks, meals, quiet evenings. But there's always that undercurrent of gratitude, something Miller feels in the small moments. The way Luna leans her head into his hand, the way the pup drapes a paw over her leg when they sleep. One Sunday morning, Miller drives them both out to the river. The water moves slow under a thin layer of ice along the banks. He lets them off leash in a fenced stretch of land he'd prepared just for them. The pup races in circles, snow flying under his paws, while Luna watches, occasionally breaking into a steady lope to meet him halfway. Standing there, Miller realizes that what he fought for wasn't just to keep them alive. It was to give them this: freedom without fear, companionship without the threat of separation. By the time they load back into the truck, the sun is setting behind the bare trees, and the inside of the cab smells faintly of wet dog and cold air. The pup curls into Luna, and she rests her chin on top of his head. That night, as Miller sits on the couch reading, Luna climbs up beside him, the pup following as always. They settle close, the steady weight of them grounding him. He reaches over, resting a hand on Luna's neck, feeling the slow rise and fall of her breathing. There's no fanfare to the moment, no grand gesture. Just the quiet certainty that they are home and they are staying. When he finally turns out the lights, the house is silent except for the soft sounds of sleep. 2 heartbeats, steady and unbroken. Thanks for making it this far, but don't leave yet. On the screen next to you, there's another exciting story. Click, subscribe to the channel and share. I'll be waiting for you there.